Hello again, welcome back. Another week of A Photographer Talks. Very happy to have joining me this week a photographer who started his photographic career or photographic life as an intern at Magnum Photos and who 14 years later was their president in 2010. His array of projects and resulting photographs are quite literally photojournalism at its finest. Jonas Bendiksen's sharply evocative images explore themes of community, faith, and identity and are unsparing in their honesty. He's made major bodies of work all around the world at the same time as photographing just the normal daily life. As well as many critically acclaimed long-form projects, he's produced significant work as well for many commercial and editorial clients. Born in Norway in 1977, Jonas began his career, as I said, at the age of 19 as an intern in Magnum's offices, before leaving for Russia to pursue his own work as a photojournalist, some of which we will discuss imminently. Throughout the several years he spent there, Jonas photographed stories from the fringes of the Soviet Union and which resulted in a project that resulted in a book called Satellites in 2006. His most recent book, The Last Testament, published in 2017, told the story of 7 men who all claimed to be the biblical Messiah who has returned to Earth. Bendiksen became a nominee of Magnum Photos in 2004 and a member in 2008, and he lives with his wife and 3 children just outside Oslo in Norway. Please join me in welcoming Jonas Bendiksen to your screens. Hello, sir.
Hello, Charlie. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me. Sorry, I got a bit of a mouthful in some of your intro there, and fluffed my words. Not something I normally do, so we'll correct it as we go through.
Okay.
It's good to see you. Looking very well, young as ever. I don't think there's a grey hair on Jonas Bendiksen, is there?
Yeah, there's a great beard at least.
Oh no, we can't see it. That's the beauty of
I
technology.
remember back in the day, people used to call me sort of one of the young photographers. One of the young guys out there. One of the young guys in Magnum. Nobody says that anymore. I started noticing that it's been a long time since anyone referred to me as that. So I'm living well with that. But like I just told you, I just had to invest in my first reading glasses because I could no longer see any of my pictures when I was trying to edit them. So +1. Okay, I can see a few more years at least.
Age is starting to get the better of you, but not too much. Not too much. I mean, you are still. To be fair, you are still one of the young guys.
It's so much worse than aging.
Oh, I've lost you. I've lost your voice.
I said the alternative to getting older is.
I lost your voice, Jonas.
Really? I didn't touch anything. You can't hear me?
That's a bit of a strange one.
Oh my god. Really? I hear you perfectly.
Apologies, everybody. Having a bit of a technical difficulty here. Seem to have just completely lost Jonas's voice.
That's strange. You really can't hear me? Hang on. Let me try it. Is that any better? No? That's not good.
How strange. Okay. If anyone's viewing, can you pop something in the comment to just see if we can, if you can hear me or you can hear Jonas? This is most bizarre. I've not had this before. Neither of us are sure what's going on, it would seem. Oh dear. Goodness me. Okay. Strange. Jonas?
Yeah.
I'm stumped.
Yeah. Well, we can try a restart, but that's kind of. Let me see if I can do something in preferences. Hang on.
Hello again? Say
Yeah.
something?
I hear you. I hear you. Something. Blah 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 blah.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Okay. No.
I have no idea what's
Can I try
happening here.
restart?
This has never happened before. Okay, we're going to start a new Skype here and see what happens.
How's that?
No.
Ah, really?
Okay.
I hear you again. I hear you.
Okay, there, we're going to go. Now it's working. I don't quite know what happened there, but all my microphones and headphones just are not being recognized by my software. So apologies, we're going to go loud.
So now you hear me. Perfect. Okay. Okay.
Sorry, everybody. Not sure what happened there. We had a technical glitch. So now we're going to do it slightly differently. So back in the room, Jonas.
Great.
We were talking about how you were looking continually young, and you haven't changed in all the years. So to kick things off, I mentioned that you started working as at Magnum at the age of 19 as an intern. What I'd like to ask is, what took you there? What in the intervening years of Jonas Bendiksen's birth and growing up to the age of 19, what was the thing? What was the catalyst that took you from the home of Oslo to London and Magnum?
Well, I think, I discovered photography sort of by chance when I was 15, 16 years old, I think, when I discovered my father's SLR gathering dust in the cupboard. And, I'm a curious kind of guy, so I started fiddling with that. And, I sort of went out, took some pictures with it. And, there was something about it that engaged me with this camera, and then I started taking pictures. After a while, I got interested in sort of like what's the mechanics of developing pictures. Me and my dad helped me build a tiny dark room in the sort of family bathroom, with an enlarger over the toilet and kind of like developing trays in the shower. And I was just really enamored by the pure sort of magic and the alchemy of the process in a way. And then it became something I just like did more and more. Started going to the library, trying to find photo books and photo magazines, and through those I kind of got exposed to sort of maybe the sort of the icons of photography, and it somehow just spoke to me, and maybe especially the documentary vein of photography, this idea that people were out there sort of going out there in the world and seeing things and using the camera to both record it but comment on it, and sort of like that really spoke to me. So it was something that started just taking more and more of my time as I was going through high school, at the expense of probably like other things. And then sort of when I was nearing the end of high school, I had to figure out sort of, whoa, what am I going to do in life? Do I find something that engages me, or do I keep doing this thing that sort of is already like I'm falling into this hole of photography, and do I just keep doing that? And I ended up sort of just keeping wanting to do photography. I feel like I never really took the decision to become a photographer. I kind of just slid into it. I just continued photography in a way. Then I had to figure out a place to learn more about photography, but I was a very restless guy. I was a very restless and curious, and I was sort of bursting with wanderlust and kind of real jittery teenager. And I didn't see myself going, studying in an academic sense. I'm a very hands-on kind of guy. I like tinkering with stuff. I found this little college in Bristol called Filton College, just sort of like trying to get information about every possibility out there in Norway, Sweden, England, wherever. And the thing about Filton College, it was like a 1-year foundation course, like a very vocational, very simple course. But they had this thing where one of their students every year got funneled into this Magnum internship. And I'd already discovered Magnum and a lot of these sort of early heroes of mine in documentary photography, were people associated with Magnum. And I just decided, like, okay, I want to be that guy who gets that place, because I think that's actually where I will learn the most. And that's how that happened. They probably felt sorry for me because I was so I so much wanted that place that I sort of got it.
Oh, really? And what age were you at this point?
Yeah, like 18, 19 probably, 19.
So you were doing that at the same time as being an intern at the Magnum offices?
No, that's how I became an intern.
Oh, okay, so that followed your time at Filton College.
Yeah, so 1 year in Bristol and 1 year in the Magnum office in London, which was really sort of my education in photography, in the sense that, I mean, I didn't have any glorious tasks to do there. I was making tea and coffee and running to the post office with prints, but this was in the day before there was a digital archive. This was analog days still, so when the Sunday Times needed a picture of Tony Blair for the newspaper, they would call Magnum, and I would answer hello Magnum photos. I would put them through to the researcher, and they would send out physical prints to the client, and they would choose from reproduction prints, and then they would send them back in an envelope. And one of my jobs was to take those returns back into one of the thousands of boxes, which was the physical archive. England, Yellow, 07, personalities, Tony Blair, kind of thing. In that year, I learned the entire archive of Magnum by heart very well, and through being exposed to all these different visions and ways of telling photographic stories, and it's like osmosis. I think it's kind of, that's really where I learned about sort of I think photography and authorship in photography, and a little bit how things are done in the business, because I was of course eavesdropping on all the agents and the archive people, and hearing them negotiate, and hearing them sort of like how they practically would plan projects. I think I sort of, like, just by eavesdropping got a sense of how one does this stuff, how you engage with editors, how you pitch stuff, so really that's all education I have. And after that I got that internship came with a small grant, or not so small, but £5,000 or something, to start your first project. So I took that money, and I went to Russia, to Siberia. I went to live in Siberia for a year, and that's sort of where I started as a photographer.
That's fascinating. But why? What was it that? I suppose there's two questions there, really. What was it that made you decide to go to Russia, and at what point did you? I mean, you've already referenced that you liked kind of documenting life, but what was it that made you think, right, I'm going to follow this photojournalist path? Was it because you had been instilled in Magnum? Did you feel that that was the right avenue? Because obviously there's hundreds of different ways you can become a photographer.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think first of all, Russia was really. I mean, that's another long old story, but basically, that came out of sort of a family history. My mother's American. She lives in Norway, but she's American. She's a New York Jew, the daughter of sort of Jewish immigrants from Ukraine, Russia to New York pre-World War One. And when I was a teenager, I was like 12, 13, and really starting to see the world with grown-up eyes for the first time. Since I'm born in 1977, that means that that awakening as a 12, 13-year-old was exactly when the Iron Curtain came down. The sort of working hypothesis in my family had always been that the part of the family that never went to the States, that never migrated, right, pre-World War One, they were all exterminated in the Holocaust, and most of them were, but in 1989 there was this like shock letter that came from Leningrad to my grandmother, which was the revelation that there was like a branch of the family that was reaching out that was still alive, which we didn't even know about. And there was like a whole correspondence between the eastern and the western side of the family, and it turned out it was like these two very parallel lives. Like I had the sort of western, sort of middle class kind of family I knew, and then there was this whole like Soviet branch of the family, and the patriarch of the family who had written this letter, he had spent 20 years captaining a nuclear submarine out of Vladivostok. So it was a very sort of arc Western Norwegian American side and a very arc Soviet side. So this sparked for a 12, 13-year-old guy, who was already sort of restless and curious, sparked enormous amount of curiosity and sort of like what that parallel life in the Soviet Union, and sparked a huge fascination for Russia and Russian language. And so really when I was done with this internship, like the only place I wanted to go was Russia, because I was boiling with this kind of curiosity about that. And sort of, you ask about why documentary. I mean, I think I didn't realize that then, but I think now when I look back and I sort of have gotten to know myself better with time, I think photography is really, I'm not actually that interested in photography, in a funny way, I'm medium interested in photography. What I'm interested in is telling stories. And I think photography has always been, without me even understanding that for 10 years or so, but photography was sort of the tool that enabled me to sort of go out there and touch and feel and grapple with issues I was interested in. Like if I had a question about the world out there, photography has just happened always to be the way I get to explore that question, So when I went to Russia, it was because all of me was just, infatuated with this place, and I had so many unanswered questions about that part of the world, and I happened to have photography as a way I could go like dive into all those questions. Now with other projects I've done later on, there's been other questions, but photography has been the tool, the sort of mechanism which I can just dive into that. And that's what I like about photography, is like that it's a way to convert the questions I have into an exploration for myself, really. I've sort of articulated that later on, but that's, I think, what always has been going on. If I never ever start any project, the thought has actually never even occurred to me. Like I have never ever woken up and said sort of, oh, I'd love to go to that place because you can take cool pictures there. You know,
Yeah.
like that's a totally foreign concept to me. Like I never ever thought that. What will get me up in the morning is kind of going, holy shit, that's a crazy story, or that's
Yeah.
really weird. What does that mean? Or like, I really wonder about such and such and such, and then I figure out a way to go photograph that as a way to get my hands dirty with that. That's how it works for me in my brain.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, go back to the family history in Russia. It feels like, you know, there clearly was a story. There is a story. There was a story, and you had effectively an opportunity to tell that by going there. So in a way, kind of your history, your circumstance, your interests has taken you down that photojournalism path because you just naturally had an interest, and I think that's exactly what grows. It's evident in your projects as you've gone through and the images you've got. It's as you say, it's not about the beautiful place. It so happens that a lot of the places that you go are pretty interesting or beautiful for various reasons, but you're not I'm going to go and search out that beautiful landscape and that beautiful waterfall.
Yeah.
Because
by the way, I don't so often. I mean, like, I have been called a photojournalist a bunch of times, and I think I used to call myself that maybe in the beginning. You know, I have no idea if that's what I actually do. Like, I mean, like, maybe yes. I think most of what I do can probably be put in that box. But I don't actually like those boxes so much. I think of it as photography. I'm a photographer.
Yeah.
And by experience, I can say, like, almost every single one of my sort of major projects have been published in newspapers for sure, magazines. They've also been in museums and galleries, and the exact same pictures, like or books, or and photography is so malleable. I mean, like, if I would call what I do something, if I were to identify the branch, I would say through documentary photography. But what the hell does that mean? Like, there's no hard and fast definition of that either. Like, to me, documentary photography is photography that has some sort of intention or aim to comment on us, or to be part of the conversation out there about us.
Yeah.
I mean, us humans. Be part of a conversation about where we are, who we are, where we're headed. Whatever that means, and however you do that, if it's in sort of standard operating procedure photojournalism, or if it's in like some sort of weird, unique setup, I think that's probably still documentary photography, as long as that's kind of why you're going out there to take these pictures. I mean, like, so yeah. I'm not so concerned about these divisions in photography. No. I think quite often, they've been, sort of artificial in a way.
Yeah, I can understand. I mean, I suppose at the end of the day, a lot of people like to pigeonhole, and your work crosses those boundaries. At the end of the day, as you say, you're a photographer. You've documented stuff, and in the process of documenting, you've told some pretty interesting stories. So,
sure.
I mean, without further ado, let's take a look at some of those pictures that you've told, you photographed and you've told. I mean, really, I think, almost the strongest image, which sort of feels like it's sort of set your career on fire in a way, is from satellites, which is I'm going to call it butterflies, because it's in the Altai territory. And I remember having a conversation with you some time ago about, is this snow? I couldn't work it out. But this is obviously a real classic, sort of, Jonas, from your first book from 2000. This must have been pretty impressive, really, for you. You walked out of Oslo into London, and now you're in like deepest Russia, photographing stuff like this. What sort of emotions were going through you when you when you sort of stumbled across these places, and how much research did it take to get to them?
Yeah, I mean, getting to these places and finding those stories, that's a kind of research heavy kind of thing.
It is.
At that time, I was living in Moscow, sort of freelancing and pursuing various sort of strange outlying stories. I mean, like, you know, by the way, the book Satellites, Satellites.
Hey.
That's the same image. It wasn't, you know, even at that stage conceived as a book. You know, I mean, like at that time, I was a young freelancer. I was sort of living on a shoestring in Moscow. I was trying to, you know, I was pitching right, left, and center stories that I was fascinated by, and I kind of tried to go do anything I was fascinated by, and sort of just, you know, I realized much, you know, some years into that a lot of the things I was pursuing sort of was actually pieces of the same puzzle, you know, and formed a larger story in its own. They were more like chapters in one big story because they had these links between them, these stories. And that became the book Satellites, which was photographed between 1998 and 2005. So there was like 7-year stretch there. You know, what was going through my mind? I mean, like, in some cases, these were very sort of, you know, targeted approach. I went to these places because I knew that somehow it was fascinating. Other times it was really like, you know, I look back and see how, you know, stupid I was and kind of how lucky I got, you know. I mean, like, actually with this image, which is, you know, like you say, maybe my most well-known image, of course, a very spectacular setting. You know, you get there and, you know, these big metal hung heaps of metal, they're crashed spaceship stages, right? So like when you send a space rocket up into space, only the tip ends up going in orbit, and these 30-meter long metal booster stages crash back on land. And as the story was about, these are into populated areas, and there are these guys who live off scrap metal collecting from these space rockets. Scenes out of Mad Max film, basically. And kind of like, I went there because I had heard about the story, managed through crazy calculations and working with rocket trajectory scientists to find out where these might land when they're launched from there, and had this and that kind of payload. And I went to those. These were not things that weren't reported on any other place. But when I got there, you know, so I got to this scene, and storm came through, you know, rain, and then heavenly godlight started shining, and the two farmers get up and start pulling the rocket apart. I mean, it's like the perfect scene ever, right? And then out of nowhere, thousands of white butterflies appear, and by any measure, I should have, you know, realized that this was probably a defining moment in my career, because like, what a scoop, right? But if you know, I was shocked years later because Magnum, we did this very good book, which I have to recommend to people. A very fascinating book, which is one of my favorite photo books, Contact Sheets.
I have that one.
Because it shows you the actual contact sheets from sort of well-known images, and you know, you can really see how the images are made, you know, and you go like that, and you see how the photographer gets to that moment. When I look at my contact sheet from that particular image, which is in the book, it's a real shocker, you know, because I clearly don't know what I'm looking at. I clearly don't realize that this is, you know, something unique. I'm really lazy. I'm picking up my camera. The entire scene is half a roll of film, and this particular scene where you have this really bizarre situation, and I find the long lens to kind of compress the perspective. You know, I took 3 frames, 2 of them are unsharp, you know, and you know, it clearly, I don't realize that this is like just completely spectacular. So luckily, somehow, fate would have it that I nailed it anyways, you know.
Well, you only need one shot, really.
But you know, I think that's kind of what's beautiful to me about the whole Satellites project is it's really the story of how I became a photographer as well, and it was learning by doing, and it formed me as a photographer very much, and you know, in a way I was so raw, I was so unformed that, and that's something beautiful. That's a rawness of youthful, doing everything for the first time energy. You know, I will never get that back. And that for me, satellites is that that period of my life and my creative life as well, where, you know, this was just forming, and stuff would happen there. You know, I can think of many situations there that happened because I really didn't know what I was doing, and some beauty came out of that. You know, when I was there for the first time after satellite takes place, you know, a huge geographical area. I mean, this is like the entire southern border of the Soviet, former Soviet Union, so it's not like one place. But the first chapter, which I did, the one right after the Magnum internship in Siberia, where I lived in one tiny town for about a year. That was really the first photo story I was really trying to tell that I've ever done. And before I went, I managed to get Fuji, and I had written letters to Fuji and Kodak and all the film companies to try to get some free film sponsored by them for this project, because I didn't have the money to buy that amount of film. So for some strange reason, Fuji sent me 400 rolls of slide film, you know.
Wow.
And that was wonderful, because then I had something to photograph with. But what I hadn't calculated on, of course, is that there was nowhere in 2,000 kilometers radius you could develop this stuff. So for 9-10 months I was living there, I was trying to photograph my first sort of big photo project. I didn't see a single picture because you know, it's just raw film lying in a bag. And that's very different than how you learn these days, of course, where you're always sort of slavishly looking at the screen. I think that really formed me. I think it probably amplified this kind of, I think, natural tendency of mine to sort of gravitate to the story more than just the image. You know, that forced me to, the entire time I was there, to sort of just like try to imagine what I was getting, and try instead focus on like what situations I was trying to get into, or with the people I met and my relationships. And I think that formed me forever after somehow.
Yeah, that would make sense. You had to be focused, didn't you? I mean, back in those days, you took the pictures and you just put the roll of film away until whenever you could actually go and develop it. So you knew sort of subconsciously that you had to get it right, because there wasn't going to be any coming back. Whereas now, you know, oh, it's not sharp, I'm going to shoot it again. It was a very different headspace. But I mean, five years later, right? You're in one of the shots I've got here is the Black Sea bathing. So this is 5 years later in Abkhazia. By this point, I'd imagine you've started to understand your way and how you shoot pictures. Your hit rate on your contact sheets probably increased by this point. But here again, still part of it. So you're still going back 5 years later, 6 years. You said it was 99 to 2007. Was that right? Or 98 to 2007?
98 through 2005, yeah.
So you've got the Black Sea shot here, which is, you know, something else. Here, this is, you know, you're right up against these people, you know, who are, I mean, I doesn't look as though you're using a zoom. Looks like you're probably on a 35 or 50 mil or something. Were you dressed in the same way? How did you kind of gel in with these guys? Because you're
on the beach, you know, that's what you do. Just hang out at the beach. So no, I was probably at the beach. I remember being on top of that boat myself and jumping in.
But
you were
being one of them.
Yeah, it was like a hangout, that place. So you would go there. I went there many times. I hung out. You know, I mean, in terms of like approaching people, and you know, I try always to just sort of like be myself and try to be very open and about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I try to not sort of sneak with my camera. I try to like just flag it quite openly, because I think sort of, people smell from 2 kilometers away if you are trying to kind of sneak your way through it, or you're trying to kind of cloak and dagger it a little bit. You're trying to present why you're there in a slightly better light than why you're maybe there. Like, people kind of smell that. They smell your insecurity about it. And normally what works best is when you get in the flow and you're comfortable in your skin, and you say like, yeah, I came here because this fascinates me, and I want to, tell a story through pictures of it, and that's why I'm here. And I took your picture because this scene looked interesting, and you looked interesting, and people kind of, not everyone, but people normally kind of can relate to that.
And respond.
I don't remember any sort of situations around the beach in Stockholm there where it was like that was tricky. I mean, like, it was just hanging at the beach and taking pictures.
But that's quite different to the other image from the satellite series, which is the say it right, Transdniester, the ice cross. I mean, here obviously you kind of, well, I'd say obviously, did you appear here? Was this close to the community you were living in at the time, or because here you wouldn't have been just jumping into this, obviously, in the same way that at the beach. So what was the situation surrounding this shot?
Well, not at that time. These days, I'm a big fan of ice swimming. Actually,
yes, well, true.
That's
that's the Norwegian in
it's
you.
a very healthy thing to do,
It is.
So I can recommend that. That'll be my advice for young photographers: is do a lot of ice swimming. But I didn't know that back then, of course. So I did not go in. But so Transdniester was one of these. Satellites project is really about a bunch of unrecognized republics. Like Abkhazia, Transdniester, Nagorno-Karabakh. They're all sort of unrecognized countries, if you like. I mean, they're places that have their own borders, their own political system. Some have their own currencies. They have their own army. They have everything that you associate with any other country, except recognition from the international society that they exist.
Yeah.
So it's like a ghost republic. It's a country that doesn't exist. So the story is really about people who live in this kind of like cracks of history after the Soviet breakup, where sort of they never really moved on to a new sort of world order. And Transdniester is one of these places. It's still there, there's still a big border fence there, and they have their own republic. Nobody recognizes them to exist except maybe Russia and a few other unrecognized countries, so to speak. So this is basically, it's located sort of between Moldova and Ukraine. So in each of these places, I was going in and just trying to sort of record, make a little recording of daily life or that feeling I got in that place, and sort of try to tell these unique stories with images. So the cross, it's a baptism. It's on that day in January, the day of the Epiphany, I think it's called. So that's a big tradition in that part of the world. They sort of cut crosses in the ice and jump in and baptize and get baptized and stuff like that.
Fascinating. It's pretty. You never quite know what's going on in this one, but it's a great shot.
Yeah, I mean, I like ambiguous images often. I like images that are a little bit sort of ambiguous. You maybe don't quite know what's going on, or you can kind of imagine stories in it that aren't quite resolved, or I think those are images I often gravitate towards. So like that's also why I sort of in terms of this photojournalism or whatever, I mean, like I don't know, in some sense, sometimes I'm trying to really to convey information with my images. Sometimes I'm actually trying to kind of muddle up information and make it ambiguous. So, I mean, it's like, is that a journalistic project or not? And, you can see it both ways, but yeah.
I think that's actually a really nice way of putting it, because if you look at the next couple of images that we've got before we talk about the Last Testament, from your places, the places we live, for example, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful image, but obviously it's quite loaded. It's a beautiful picture. The lights, the girl playing. There's a sort of honesty in it, which you discussed already. There's an innocence in it, but obviously the reality is this is in a massive slum in Mumbai, which I can't comment on where it is now. But reading through some of your notes, it was sort of a very a part of Mumbai that was destined for sort of redevelopment. So this image here, you've moved on, you've moved away from Russia, you've moved into sort of the next project to sort of document most definitely the places we live. And this is ambiguous in every sense because it's beautiful, but also quite sad.
Yeah, in that project, you could say, yeah, I mean, like, I had a more maybe agenda of, a very clear point I wanted to make, or like a very clear exploration I want to do. I mean, that project really came out of a fascination I got when I was presented some statistics back in 2004. I think it was, I had recently become a father myself at that time, and I was kind of like, trying to find my place, and sort of like create a safe haven for me and my family and stuff like that. And I read these numbers from the UN that said that like a few years later, 4 years after that point, in 2008, the world's urban population would for the first time outnumber the world's rural population. So for the first time, a real watershed in human history where more people would live in the cities than in the countryside. For the first time, we would be urban species. And at the same time, as that crossroads in 2008, UN also projected exactly the same moment. The number of people living in urban slums would pass 1 billion, a number they projected to double over the next few decades. So it meant that sort of urban slums were actually at that point sort of the fastest growing human habitat on the planet. This fascinated me, of course, because, like I said, I was myself trying to, I was new to this idea of having a family and creating a home, and it got me really. What does these places look like on the ground if you have 1 billion people living like that, and maybe that was going to be 2 billion within a few decades? I mean, that's like that's a huge chunk of the human population. Like, we should know these places better. What do they? Because I'm speaking for myself as well. Like, we often have a huge amount of stereotypes about what these places are, who lives there, what's the agenda of the people who live there. And I wanted to test my own stereotypes. I want to see what that was all about. Like I said in the beginning of this talk, again, it started with like actually a fascination with these numbers.
Yeah.
What do they mean on the ground? Like, if there's 1 billion people living in slums, they're not all just like gang leaders and hoodlums, right? I mean, there must be like normal, like, what is that for a normal family? And that's really the places we live. It's really it's really an exploration of what does normalcy mean in these places. I wasn't so in pursuing so much there's sewage on the street here, there's crime there, whatever. I was interested in how do families create normalcy. So I mean, like, we have the cover image I think you're looking at now.
Yeah.
But the driver of the whole book is really that in each of these places we go into people's homes and in each of these houses, I'm photographing the four walls of this house. And in these places, people tend to live in one room, whether it's two people or 10 people, a lot of them live in one room. So in each of the four slums I visited around the world, I made these documents of people's four walls, these domestic universes, and then I would interview them, record, hear their stories, and a lot of that was about like how do these people create a normal life, and sort of like it was all very recognizable, I think, to anyone, that the sort of agenda people had, and how, what the interiors, I think everyone can recognize stuff on there. It's the family pictures on the wall. There's the calendar of homework, and there's the food, and so it was really about not that we don't just need shelter or we need a house to live in, but we need a home. And people have this like crazy drive to create a home, no matter your station in life and the level of hardship and challenges you're faced with. That's really what this project was about. And it was a huge exhibition where you actually went into these rooms. I created these installations where you had like 16 projectors create these rooms you actually went into. You heard these stories, and so in a sense that was a project where I tried to get away from ambiguity, because I really wanted to grapple with those questions very much head on. I felt like I had I really felt like I was on a mission, to toy with my own stereotypes and then hopefully other people's stereotypes about these places. For me, it was sort of deeply fascinating, the whole thing, and I think changed me in many ways. But so there, I had a very much you could call it a humanistic agenda. I was. It was also a very collaborative project because it was really much about recording these audio stories and these interviews with people where they were talking about their lives in these places, and in a way trying to celebrate, not shying away from the hardships, but also celebrating the achievements and the ambitions and the dreams of the people I met there. Yeah, so it was, in some ways it was jump from satellites, but, I'm looking back as well, all my projects have also very many strong links, between them, they're about people off the grid somehow, it's about people in some sort of isolation from their surroundings, whether it's an unrecognized country in the former Soviet Union, that's a sort of enclave, then, these slums are their own type of enclaves, and unrecognized countries, you could say, you have, they're often not on the map either, on the urban city planning map, they're not on there because they're kind of informal settlements. So these things are actually quite close in many ways. In The Last Testament, my most recent book, it's also about people who are sort of off the grid, sort of maybe sort of spiritually speaking, people who are way outside the mainstream of faith and religion and sort of on a psychological level, on a mental, a spiritual level. I guess I'm interested in things that lie a little bit outside the box, a little bit outside the norm, and those are the stories I often want to be exploring, and they take many different forms.
I think it's definitely an interest in the human being and the way that we live and the way we exist are very evident in the last two, just before we hop to The Last Testament, which is clearly kind of encapsulates everything we talked about, is your other project, Far From Home, and the image that we'll share is the pool ambassador, but that this shows almost the glamorous side of the humans in this project, where it focused far more on almost the workers and their existence in Dubai and sort of the Middle Eastern states. And I mean, I'm putting the pool ambassador up now, which shows, as I say, the glamorous side of it. But I know from personal experience, I went to Doha not long ago, and Doha there, you see the buses shipping everybody in at 7 a.m. and then shipping them home at 7 p.m. while they go through rapid growth. And that's what this project was very much about, wasn't it?
Yeah. So Far From Home was a project I did, which was about guest workers, remittance workers, and I again, it came out of some funny statistic I saw, which was from the World Bank this time, that said that the amount of money sent home by remittance workers, meaning people who have left their home, gone to another place, often like a sort of richer place, to work, save money, send money home every month to their families to, build a new house or a farm or buy a new cow or a car or whatever, put your son through school, often in installments of $50 a month or whatever you can save when you're working out there. The amount of money sent home by remittance workers back to their families totals more than 3 times the amount of all international foreign aid per year. So like a mind-boggling amount of money that these guys from Bangladesh and the Philippines and Indonesia and Pakistan and Nepal and wherever they end up earning this money, sending it back home, that is a very powerful economic force. And to me, this was a big surprise because I hardly ever heard about these guys even. So I decided to make a project about a remittance worker, see what is his and her life like. And I wanted to do it in the place in the region of the world where they're most dependent on the labor of these guys, which is the Gulf oil states like the Emirates and Qatar and these places where, you go to Dubai and at any given moment, about 90% of the population is foreign guest workers.
Mm.
Which is in its own, it's a very mind-boggling in its own sense. Also because these places are branding themselves as sort of like where you can go for cheap luxury. You can, come from Europe and you go for cheap 5-star experience, and everything about theme parks and luxury hotels and the biggest of everything and the most expensive of everything and the tallest towers and the biggest shopping mall and the indoor ski center. I mean, like, it's all kind of larger than life. But, it turns out that, like, once you scratch the surface of that, all of this cheap luxury is powered by the labor of these foreign workers. And that was a really difficult story to do, maybe the most difficult project I've done, because nobody wants you to have access to see these things. So, so I met a lot of very difficult people in difficult positions because they're in often very fragile situation, these workers. Anyway, so that image we're looking at here is the image of Alex, a young guy from Ghana, who traveled from Ghana to live there and send money home. He worked as the pool ambassador at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, so basically serving cocktails to tourists. There's just a lot of bizarre human stories, some mixture of the tragic, at times almost comical, but really strong stories.
Yeah, I love that picture because it tells such a fascinating story, really, doesn't it? But I think that the shot, I just wanted to say, I think the shot from Far From Home that really explains exactly everything you've just talked about is when there's you have the split of the image, and on the left and the right are all the workers, and then there must be probably almost 50 in the picture, probably, and then walking straight down the middle are the glitterati, the emirati.
Yeah.
It's like the absolute other end of society in your picture, and it summarizes that in a way quite nicely.
Yeah, I mean, that was your putting your finger on what was also difficult about the project, because how do you tell a story also without caricaturing too much?
Yeah.
Because the contrasts are so extremely
massive.
big, and it gets almost like visually too brutal. oversimplifying in a way. So the one with the pool here is maybe an attempt of me where comparing to our conversation earlier, like I'm trying to pull back a little bit, actually make a slightly more ambiguous image.
Yeah.
That somehow is stronger because it's not as punch you in the face. Here's rich, here poor, here is master, here is servant. I mean, like, and one doesn't quite know. I mean, like, I don't know. Those tourists might be human rights workers. For all I know, the guys in the background in the pool, like having a break from their conference. I mean, like, I'm very aware of, like, you know, I as one photographer, you know, I don't know all this context always, and you know, we tend to make suppositions based on very sort of black and white predefined setups. So I'm trying to create images here that sort of like lead you to the questions, the same questions that I'm asking myself, you know, and clearly there's a lot of tension here. There's tension in the image. There's tension between what this guy is doing and like the whole a whole situation around, without relying too much on the specific details, if you like. There's also like a double-sidedness to their experience. You know, some people will call this modern slavery. You know, that's what this whole situation is all about. This is what slavery looks like today, because a lot of these people end up in very sort of exploitative situations. For others, it's a way to be entrepreneurial and get out of poverty in rural India or wherever, you know, a crushing rural perpetual poverty situation. This is a way to break the cycle, to get out there with ambition. Maybe it costs a lot, but of years and money and labor, but you know, it's a very sort of forceful trying to break a perpetual poverty cycle. And for some it works, you know. I mean, like, so there isn't just the black and white of the situation. There sometimes this also works for the worker. So
yeah, exactly.
I wanted to bring that into that project, that it's not just like a binary thing.
Yeah, and well, obviously, I think you did a very good job of it. Did you make that one into a book? I'm not.
No, but it became a big National Geographic story. You know, they did a 30-page story in National Geographic, and it was like made a big splash in the editorial. So I was very happy because it was a very difficult thing to do, sort of access-wise, and I was happy I was sort of like managed to tell, you know, make something out of that story.
Yeah. Oh, it was fabulous. I mean, especially having seen it from a personal perspective, not where you shot it, but in Qatar. You know, it was very eye-opening to see it, you know, firsthand. So, you know, I can understand how difficult it must have been for you to get to those positions to shoot some of those pictures, being on the buses and so on.
A lot of people don't even see these guys because the whole system is designed to make these people invisible. You know, I mean, like exactly. They're bussed in at 5 a.m. in the morning before you wake up. They're bussed away after dark again, back into the labor camp in the desert where the guys live. You know, out of sight.
Exactly.
The city in the evening. You know, I mean, it's very much designed to keep the whole system invisible.
Yeah. Everyone's busy.
So, I mean, I think a lot of people will go there and they don't see it, you know.
Yeah, it's very true. Everyone's busy taking their photographs of the beautiful sunset, and in the meantime, there's all these buses bussing everyone back to their camps behind you. So look, we'll do a little bit. We'll talk a bit longer because we obviously had that technical issue. So we'll crack on and talk about the Last Testament, because this is super fascinating. And I think, you know, it's an amazing body of work. Just looking at it, just without even looking at the pictures, you're like, wow, this is something else. You chose. I've picked a few pictures from some of your subjects, not all of them, but you went through or you started to put this together because you had yourself an inherent interest in sort of religion and trying to understand it. The piece of work to get here must have been massive, your research. I mean, how did you determine, or how did you rather choose, should we say, the 7 disciples, almost, if you want to call them that. The seven
Messiahs.
seven messiahs.
Yeah, I mean, they chose themselves, kind of thing, because the thing is, so I was fascinated with faith and religion. I didn't grow up with religion myself, but I've always been very fascinated by it. Always enjoyed reading the religious scripture, whether it's the Quran or the whatever, or the Bible, or and I was always very fascinated by the ending of the New Testament. The I think it's the third to last sentence of the New Testament, which is this prophecy of surely I am coming back soon. So this prophecy that the Lord, after he went up into the heavens after crucifixion, he will at the end of days return to earth and bring us all into the kingdom of God, the judgment of mankind, and all this stuff. I was fascinated by that, and I think for a long time have had a project about religion in me, kind of cooking in me, and when I finally, it was time to just get it out. This was kind of, when I discovered these people who claim to be the actual Messiah, they claim to be the second coming of Christ. To me, it was sort of, okay, here's a chance to go to the source himself and answer all these questions I have. So it's about 7 men who claim to be specifically the biblical Messiah, not prophets, not gurus, not spiritual. There's thousands of guys claiming to be various kinds of prophets out there. There aren't so many people claiming to be specifically the second coming of Christ. Of course, you can walk into any mental institution in wherever you are in the world and find people who claim to be Jesus. It's quite common. But I wanted to filter out those guys. So when I sat down to Google my way through the world to find these guys, by the way, all these people are purely found through Google. That's how you find people these days. It had to be people who were already out there in the public sphere with these claims. It had to be people who had these claims for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And sort of had a documentation of that. They had a consistent theology over a long period of time that somehow made sense, that was just utter random, and once you apply those filters, I didn't find so many more than these guys. There were a couple of more here and there. Some I couldn't get access to, some were like impossible to find, some were sort of hostile to the project. But we're not talking many more, a handful more. So actually these 7 were the 7 that sort of were there that I could engage with. And 7, of course, is a very significant number in the Bible. So that's just how it ended up.
That's okay.
So
that's
I didn't really make a selection, so to speak.
Okay, no, but that makes sense. Because I didn't know the full story behind it, and that makes perfect sense. I think before I'm going to show 2 pictures. I think, well, I don't know, 3 or 4 actually. I really like your pictures of Inri Christo. But before I go with him, I really have to bring up David Shayler. Well, because I'm British and he's British, but also because I also photographed him. If you sit down there, I lose you. Oh, your camera's moving. That's very clever. Okay, this is a technological feast. This interview. So David Shayler, purely because I personally have also met him.
Yeah, great.
And I've also photographed him. I sent you a couple of pictures.
Yeah. When did you meet David?
It was 2009.
Oh yeah, okay.
So it was when I was living in London, and there was an eco village that had sprung up on the banks of the Thames, where now a huge development has been built. But at that time, it was had been taken over by environmentalists, and they were living on the land. And for a period of 2 or 3 months, I was going there, photographing them every day and talking to them. And David Shayler, or Dolores Kane, was one of them.
Great.
And and here he is in the picture I'm putting up, the sort of mini stage festival shot of him that you shared with me from your press. So fascinating, I think it's great that I've met one of these guys, but I think at this point, for me in 2009, he wasn't quite that far down the line of belief that he was when you got to him. I think it was a little bit later that you photographed him, maybe 2 or 3 years later, because this was only a couple of years after he'd sort of left, or been the whistleblower.
Yeah.
So obviously he's come on a long way by the time you encountered him in this extraordinary field, which doesn't look altogether too different from the scenario that I found him in.
Yeah. No, I mean, I find it very. I spent a lot of time with David, and like all the other ones, he deeply fascinated me. I think people have a tendency to sort of like, say like, surely David can't be the Messiah because he's hanging out with these sort of not mainstream people. He doesn't have any traction with the big guys in government or with influence, and he's kind of operating on that sort of more informal level. And what I think he sort of pinpoints just through his life story is sort of like, if you read the Gospels, if you read the story of Jesus of Nazareth 2,000 years ago, and actually think about what we celebrate about the guy, whenever you step into church on Christmas or Easter or whenever you go, it's that precisely that he didn't hang out with the people of influence and power and money and the generals and the priests and the rich guys. He celebrated because he chose to hang with the outcasts, the prostitutes, the lepers, the down and outs. His disciples were a bunch of illiterate fishermen he picked up at the Sea of Galilee. He wandered around Judea, with his sort of motley crew of followers. If there's one thing, that situation that's described in the Gospels from 2,000 years ago, if there's one situation that would resemble it, it's someone like David. So would it be such a stretch to say that if the Lord chose to come back to earth at this time, like maybe he would follow the same modus operandi?
Yes, true.
I have no idea myself. I don't really, I'm just there to chronicle and tell the story. I make no judgment about whether this guy actually is the Messiah or this guy isn't or whatever. I'm in each chapter of this project. Whenever I'm with one of the people I was going to photograph and tell the story, I wanted to go in there. I wanted to take everything they told me, everything they showed me, everything they demonstrated as the whole and complete truth. I wasn't there to sort of try to question that.
Yeah.
I wanted to rather use photography and text to try to describe what the world might look like from that vantage point with those glasses on. And that's sort of the exercise I went through with each and every one of these.
Yeah.
The book is called The Last Testament because all of these messiahs produce their own scripture, which is meant to complement the two other installments that we know from before, the Old Testament and the New Testament. And it's usually called something like the Last Testament. I think David's scripture is called the Third and Final Testament. And he's produced a lot of writing. He explains his theology. And it's these questions I was churning around all the time. Like, what is it specifically about, if you're opposed to David being the Messiah, but you are a believer, what is it per definition about David's theology and his preachings that per definition make them, uh, that's crazy versus what's being preached in any other mainstream house of God, that is legitimate. Like, who gets to decide that this is per definition less plausible a scenario that David's mapping out than any of the other things we believe? How most religions cancel each other out. Like, if you are a Hindu, you will automatically, probably negate everything Christianity stands for.
Absolutely.
On a theological level. If you're a Christian, then you will find, vice versa.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same with whether it's David or Inri or the Pope or whoever.
Yes, yeah, that's valid. I think the other valid point you rightly say, is the way he looks, and you look at him in comparison to Inri, or you look at him in comparison to Vissarion.
The one thing that's repeated again and again in Scripture, when you are trying to read about the coming of the Messiah, is that again and again the same line is repeated in many different sections of Scripture, and it's this line of the Messiah, he will come as a thief in the night, meaning that he will appear in the form you least expect it, maybe. He will come at a time you don't expect it. He will come in the form you don't expect it. So, you could say a lot of the people I met maybe fulfilled that prophecy quite nicely.
Yes, very much so. I mean, I've just put up on screen Inri, obviously David, Vissarion, and Moses, all perfect, all perfectly different in their own way. I think the last question I'd kind of like to put on this is about Vissarion. We talked about, obviously, disciples, the Last Supper, and the shot you've got there of it's like a modern day painting of the Last Supper. It's fantastic, of his disciples, shall we say? But the image of him in, well, wherever this is, a hotel room, a religious chamber, I'm not entirely sure. This is super fascinating. Did you pose him for this, or was this his desired position, shall we say?
I mean, I would say straight away I didn't pose him, but which picture are we talking about? Because I don't actually see it on the screen.
No, of course. It's Vissarion sat there in his white gown, with looking quite almost regal.
Oh yeah, looking majestic. Well, actually, that one was a portrait setting. I mean, I didn't, in each of what.
The reason I ask is because the other shots are sort of fairly, well, documentary in the way that we've discussed everything. Whereas this is almost the most posed shot I think I've seen of yours.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So you can see in the different chapters of the book, it's a big fat book, it's 460 pages, this Last Testament here, where each of these stories are being told. Each chapter is quite different in terms of my access to these people. Some I get very close to the Messiah himself. Others keep me at arm's length. Some I get very close to the people in the community, the disciples and the followers, but maybe not the Messiah. And Vissarion would be one of these. I spent a lot of time with the Vissarionites, got very close to many of the followers. But Vissarion himself, I only met once for half an hour.
Or wow.
An hour maybe. In a very formal audience setting where I interviewed him. And that was after I traveled to Siberia 3 times. And then I met him finally. And this is the setting where I finally meet him after all this time. And I get to talk to him. I get to ask him the questions I want to ask him. I get to touch him. And I get at the very end of that, I get to take pictures for about 45 seconds. So that image is that culmination of my search for, it's really, I'm finally get to, and I asked him at the end of my session, may I take some photographs? Yes, you may. And he's not one who likes having and he clearly doesn't like it. This is where he sat when we had our interaction. So I get up and I very, very simply with simple lens take his picture, and I think I had 20 frames or something. So I mean, is it a post? I mean, yes, it was post in the sense that now we have a portrait session.
Yes.
He carries himself very majestically, so to speak. So I mean, like he would kind of self-pose himself like that. So I didn't, because there was just no time. It was really, okay, now he's sitting, I take a picture. But it was clearly like a photo session, you could say. We did also a documentary, a 4-part TV documentary about my search for the Messiah. It's called Messiah. It's subtitled in English. It's on NRK.no, the Norwegian sort of BBC equivalent. And in that, there's a 40-minute episode about me and Vissarion. You can, if one is interested in this project, you can see more like these interactions. And there is also my grand meeting with Vissarion, and you can see how all this happened.
Fantastic.
If you search for Messiah and NRK, that series will come up.
All right, I'll try and find the link and stick it in the bio.
Cool.
That's great, though. It's great to hear. After all that, all the way that we've talked about how you shoot, that actually there is still an occasion when Jonas is much like all the rest of the photographers out there, that they suddenly have got this amount of time to take a very important picture. So when push comes to shove, you're a photographer true to heart, because we've all been there. Pressure, get that one shot. Well, you got that shot. He's definitely he's very graceful there in the way he looks.
Yeah. Now, of course, he's arrested by the authorities.
Oh, is he?
Oh yeah, he and his 2 main disciples are in jail. They were arrested in a big FSB raid on the community this spring, and they are arrested, awaiting trial. My sense is that it's not gonna end very well.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So this was also, that also makes photography is you never quite know the value of your pictures when you take them. They change with time. 10 years later, you look at the same pictures with totally different glasses on. And, I think in this case, I was there at maybe the peak of this community. Who knows what will happen there now? What will happen now that he's in jail? Will he be sentenced? Will he be there for long? What will happen to the thousands of followers who are living out there in the woods in this community? Will that disintegrate? Will it keep going? Who knows? But I mean, like, now those pictures have another level of meaning that I never expected them to have when I took them, right? So that's an interesting thing. As you do photography for a long period of time, then you start to notice these situations where your images change with time.
Yeah, it's very true. And it's always the classic adage that you go back and look at your pictures 5, 10, 15, 20 years later, and you see something different. You see ones that you like more than the others.
Sure.
So long as there's enough of them on your contact sheet to satisfy.
Yeah, exactly.
So Jonas, I think we'll look to wrap it up there. It's been fantastic to talk with you. There's so much more really I'd like to ask, but I'm also conscious of the time, and we managed to circumvent our technical issues at the beginning. So thanks for your patience, and thanks for those of you at the who are watching. I'll see if I can edit out the dodgy bit in the YouTube live before it goes on online. But for now, thanks very much. It's been fantastic to see you again. 5 years since the last time, I think. No, not quite. Maybe a little bit less. I think it was in London. Let's hope that we can see each other again at some time soon. For now, stay safe and enjoy living at home with the family. Look into what the next project might be, and I look forward to sort of seeing and hearing a bit more about it. Thanks for taking your time.
Thank you, Charlie. It was a pleasure.
We'll see you hopefully again soon, and have a good Christmas. I can say that. Thank you very much for spending some time with me here, and Jonas. I'm sorry for the technical issues we had at the beginning. If you're watching now, I hopefully will have edited that out. But go, Jonas, shush for a second. You're not on camera. I'm wrapping up. Jonas is still listening. No, it's all right. Look, we'll bring him back. There you go. He's back again.
Sorry, I will shut up now. Bye, everyone.
So we'll try again. Thanks very much for joining. Fantastic to have Jonas on and hear really how he's come on in the last, in his life really, in the 25 years that he's been shooting, and hear all about Last Testament and how he got there. If you haven't got the book, get a copy, or even some of his other ones. Really, they are fascinating reads and visually very stimulating. He's got a lot more to tell, and hopefully, we'll see some more fantastic work come out of him in the next few years. As for now, thanks very much for joining, and do tune in again next time. Bye bye.